Your true power is living from the heart. What? Welcome to the Joyous Expansion Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Dupree, scouring the globe to bring you stories of courage, passion, and resilience. If I could sum up this podcast into one word, I would use empathy. Now let's get inspired. Welcome to the Joyous Expansion Podcast. I am your host, Brett Dupree, your Joyous Expansion Life Coach. At least that's what I call myself. Hooray! Number 20. That is awesome. Episode 20, that is. And I am super happy that this is episode 20. Why? Because 20 is a big number. Is divisible by 10, is divisible by 5, as most things are that are divisible by 10. And it's just, every time you do something and it's the something zeroth of it, it's bigger, it's better, it's awesome, it's more uncut. And it just makes me so happy that I have reached 20 episodes of the Joyous Expansion Podcast. What's going on in my life? What's going on in my thoughts? Well, I just spent 9 days with my girlfriend. She came over for 9 days. She lives kind of far away, but not super far away. And that was pretty fun. I loved every second of that. And now I understand what it's like. That's the closest, I never really talked about my relationships on my podcast, mostly because it just not a relationship podcast, but things are going good. I'm in love, which is always fun. And yeah, mostly this interview that I've listened to today, which is the one I just was editing, which is the one that you'll listen to a little later. By a little later, I mean probably 5 to 10 minutes, because that's how long I like to talk at the beginning of my podcast, is about relationships, one person's relationship. It is interesting to me about what goes into a good relationship. When I first started my personal development journey, that was actually one of the big catalysts for me to get started, is to figure out how to make a good relationship. I first famously started doing pickup artist stuff. Well, not really doing it, mostly just researching it, because that's what I am. A researcher. I love research. Who likes doing things? I like figuring things out and then not doing them. That's why it only took me 10 years to start a podcast. Just kidding. I had a podcast 6 years ago that I abandoned after 17 episodes, but whatever. This is not about that. This is about my journey. And a lot of things I did early was relationships, because one of my beliefs is that personal development, and I really want to take myself to a whole new level, and there's no better way to figure that out than in a relationship. But that is the problem with relationship, is the fact that it takes two to tango. You need to find someone else who's interested in you, and the fact that two people can find each other and spend years together, something that I thought was easy due to movies and TV and all that jazz, but turns out it's actually kind of hard. I remember when I was young, I was naive, and I thought, wow, everyone can get into a relationship. It's just something that will naturally happen. But as I see some of my family members getting older and not remarrying, and just seeing that maybe that will never happen. I don't know, though. My grandma got married at the age of 60-something to like a 70-year-old person, so yay! It's hope there for everyone, and it's not over till the fat walrus sings. I just trying to think of the fattest animal that could sing, but walruses mostly just yelp. But then I got into David Data because I really wanted to find a relationship, and I really like the idea of becoming a better person. The way of a superior man is all about becoming a better person. And I think that's the way to get into a good relationship, is to live in a way where I become better to attract the person I want in my life. Because there's a lot of hurt men out there, a lot of incels, if you will. People who are involuntary celibates is what that stands for. People who blame women for their failing. But the reality is nobody's owed anything, let alone sex, unless you pay for it, I guess. But chances are that woman is sex trafficked. I mean, it's not 100%, but odds are in this country, because man, that is a terrible problem. But even if you pay them, they can still say no. I don't know why I went on that tangent. Anyways, no one's owed sex. No one's owed a relationship. And to look at people and thinking that you should be in a relationship with them and getting angry is just something that is not right. And I know that I wasn't that far off that path when I think of my early years. It was mostly my anxiety of believing that nobody liked me and wanting to be liked, as well as a fear of anger and not wanting to be an angry person because I didn't want to be violent, is what kept me probably from becoming an incel type person. And because I felt it back then. I kind of felt this anger within me of, I'm a quote unquote nice guy, why doesn't anyone like me, blah 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 blah. And there was this deep seated anger, but it was mostly just pushed down because I didn't allow myself to feel angry. And that's when I picked up the book The Way of the Superior Man, based off actually a radio host, BJ Shea, who I don't know if he's a radio host anymore. Who did have the morning show as a while. I mostly see him doing geek stuff and playing board games, which is super fun because I love board games, or tabletop games, however you like to say them, because I guess they're mostly played on a table and they don't have to have a board. Maybe I need to change my lexicon on that one, or vernacular. That's probably the correct word. But the secret is, when I read The Way of the Superior Man, it helped me think of the world in a way that was different than me. Number one, do I really want to date somebody who just likes me and likes me? And it talked about men, not really men and women, but the masculine and the feminine, the part that's within us all. And honestly, the masculine feels more like logical and reason, and the feminine feels like emotional and spirit. But now that I'm older, it feels like just one and the same, and just different sides of the same coin. But the reality is the idea of the way of the superior man isn't that men are superior than women. It's the way of a man who is superior, but not superior to other people, but superior to yourself. To be a good person, a solid dude, an actual solid dude, not a quote unquote nice guy, a person who does something nice to get something, and generally that something is sex. That's something that they want, is sex. And that's not nice. If you're doing something for someone to get something, you're not being nice. You're just being a transaction. It needs to be the joy of service if you really want to do that. And that's what David Data's books taught me. It taught me that in relationship, it is the joy of service. I'm not going to say it hasn't been hard for me being in a relationship. One thing relationships tend to do is expose that vulnerable side of me, and I spent most of my life trying not to be vulnerable. I know that sounds weird about a person who does a podcast now, 20 episodes, where the first 10 to 15 minutes is him talking about vulnerable things about himself. But to be honest, it's actually more easy for me to spam that out there into the universe, talk to this microphone, and have people hear it than to have a one-on-one conversation about it and feel that vulnerability. Though I do think this is healing in itself, and that's one of the reasons why I like doing the beginning part, is to not only share my life and my struggles, which is the same. I feel if I can't do it myself, how can I ask people in interviews to do it as well? So basically, learning to become a better person for me, I believe has helped. And yes, the vulnerability part has been hard, and having that exposed and feeling exposed and generally doing something that hit that insecure part of me, because there is a part of me that's very insecure. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I haven't really put that out there. That's one of the reasons why it was hard for me to promote my podcast when I first doing it, or asking people to come on it. I could have constantly asked, but I didn't follow through as well as I should have. Even though now that I have 31 guests, because of podcastguest.com, check that website if you want guests on your podcast. Because man, I have 31 potential podcast guests right now, and that's kind of overwhelming. But that is 31 weeks of content, so one positive. Actually, 31 positives. That's really cool. Just the nature of it, which is the story of my life. But I'll actually be starting to talk about this aspect of my life starting next week, because I want to take things to a whole new level, and I'm ready to take things to a whole new level. And there's certain questions I'm going to start asking myself in a certain way I'm going to live, and I'm going to talk about that next week. And I'm excited to get this started and to see what becomes of it. This idea that I've been having that I'm just going to talk about and see if it happens, if it is as awesome as it is in my head. But I digress. You came here to learn about relationships. Relationships. So my interview this week is somebody from the We Share Possibilities Facebook group that I am a part of. Somebody who is a fan of Mike Dooley, who, if you read my book, Joyous Expansion, Mike Dooley actually gave me a nice little review, which I appreciate. And his brother Andy wrote the foreword, which is super freaking cool, in my humble opinion. In that, I am part of the same community as Caroline, and that's how I found her on here. And we're going to talk about her relationship. And it could trigger some people out there. So trigger warning, this starts as a heavy one, I think. Caroline Palmy is a heart flow healer and award-winning author. She helps gorgeous empaths, sensitive souls, earth angels, and giving hearts to come back into the flow of love. Caroline cannot help but express and embody her heart and helps others to find expression and embody their hearts too. She teaches from the heart, for the heart, and of the heart. Her first book, Conversations with Me, was published July 2018 and won a mention on Janey Love's Platinum Award list. Her second book, Loving Conversations with Me, will be published on May 9, 2019. She lives in Switzerland with her 3 nearly grown kids, a golden retriever, a cat, and 9 tortoises, surrounded by nature. You can truly hear the heart in the interview. So here is Caroline Palmy. Hello, Caroline, and welcome to my podcast.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
I've met Caroline on the We Share Infinite Possibilities group. I found her there, and she graciously accepted to come on my podcast. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you for having this offering. And I always love to share through the same. And I feel when we share from our heart, we can touch others' hearts and we can all feel better. And often I was really inspired by others to say, oh, if she or he can do that, I can do that too. You know, it's not the end of the world, but maybe it's just a new chapter in a life.
I 100% agree. In fact, that's my idea of what I want to do with my podcast, is bringing people together and listening to their stories. Your story started with marriage.
Yes, it started with a marriage. I was together with that man for 20 years, and then the marriage ended, and I woke up. So the marriage ended end of December, actually on New Year's Eve. And in March, 3 months later, I sat in my living room and I looked around and I thought of, those white leather settees, that's not really me. All those leather-bound books, that's not really me. Looked at the rocks, I said, that's not really me. And at the paintings or pictures we had on the wall, and I thought, this is all not me. And then I thought, but what is me? Who am I? And I realized that I completely lost myself. I had no idea who I was any longer because I was making my husband happy, or trying to. I was looking after my 3 children and no one was looking after me. And it was actually my job to look after me, but I sort of gave everything up and looked after everybody else and lost sense of me. That was my beautiful waking up in the living room. And it felt like, oh, wow, I've lost myself completely. But actually, it turned out to be a beautiful turning point, the start of a beautiful journey, the journey reconnecting back to myself, re-finding myself. I asked myself, what is it that I want? What is it that I would love to have? What is it that I would love to do? And I started to listen to myself. That's how my journey started.
Nice. Can you tell me more about your marriage? What was going on during it and what made you so unhappy being married?
It was one of those unhealthy relationships. I didn't realize I was in there. I only realized it later on that, there were moments when he talked down on me, sort of like, oh, the hairdresser does your hair always so nice. Why can't you do it yourself? Or you looked so nice yesterday. Why don't you look nice today? Why do you always wear jeans? can't you wear sort of a nice outfit? And I thought sort of, but I was on my knees with my children. So why should I wear a nice outfit? And also he told me sort of like, you're not worthy, you're only sitting at home, you're not really doing anything, you're not bringing in money, because I was a full-time mom. And it's not his fault. It's always together. I was eager to hear that in a way. I was only accepting this because I myself felt this way. I felt not good enough. I felt unlovable. So it was just, it takes both sides. And in that marriage, I had still have 3 wonderful children, but there was not an emotional connection. And I was often felt very lonely, very alone, and not acknowledged for what I was doing all day long with 3 children, waking up at all times during the night. I felt often tired and exhausted, and it was just like, oh, I'm exhausted too. Why do you feel exhausted? You don't do anything. So it's that sort of that emotional lack, that empathy lack, that just the missing of maybe feeling acknowledged for what I'm doing. Just for once in my life, I wanted to feel or to hear that I'm actually doing a wonderful job raising 3 children practically on my own.
Was he always like that from the beginning?
It was, I think it got worse when we had our first child and I stayed at home. And I remember he came home and he said, "Oh, how many books did you read today?" And I sort of, "Read a book? Hello. I had a newborn baby. I was feeding like every 2 hours. I was changing. I haven't had a shower all day. I haven't had time for a shower. What do you mean by reading books?" But as an empath, I felt maybe the jealousy, envy. He wanted to stay home because he thought staying home with a baby was reading books. And I never, maybe still, what if? But if I'd just given him the baby for the weekend, I said, "So you look after it, I go," it would have been maybe easier for him to really see what it all entices, what it means to be with a baby. And also I had cesarean births, so it takes longer to really recover, come back to your energy. And I didn't know that back then, and it was just lacking support. I think at the beginning it looked nice. It's just over time it gets more clarity. And then I had the kids to look after and he has his work. And then we sort of, just went different paths.
So can you get more into the loneliness that you felt during it? How did you cope?
How did I cope? I just focused on the children and I felt, okay, motherhood is my purpose. But it was not so much the sharing and sometimes, and it wasn't sort of our children, when he came home at 7:30, 8 p.m. and the kids weren't already in bed, it was sort of like, why are the kids still up? Why are the toys still lying around? It always felt like it's not good enough and I really had to try hard or fit in. For me, it was sort of, I had a fabulous time with my children, but we weren't never a family. He was maybe never so interested in the children or maybe expected it differently. He wasn't involved. So for me, it was very lonely. I did then 7 days a week, 24/7, 365. I looked after the children and that in itself, of course, was getting a bit too routine, and there wasn't a partnership. We weren't together to look after the children. And sometimes when something happens with children, it's all sort of on an emotional base. You wanted to share. And for him, he was very mind oriented. And it was not, it wasn't something I could really share. I didn't get a cuddle or a hug and say, "You know what? Tomorrow is a better day," or anything, I would do for my children to make them feel better when they fell or had a hard day, just cuddle. And I never got that. And of course, I never expressed it myself either. So it was a lonely place. And it then ended up that we went to bed at different times. And yes, we had our dinners together, but it was more me trying to make him feel good after work day. And of course, me, I still felt like, oh, he's the one working. He has a hard job. So I have to make his home life comfortable. And it was all that giving, and not really receiving much. And the weekends we didn't really spend together. He was in his study and I was with the kids. So that was a lonely time, and just not feeling acknowledged was probably the worst part.
That sounds very draining.
It was. I mean, I was so exhausted. I had probably burnout. And it's just, it was just the way it worked. And of course, it couldn't work anymore. So that's why it ended, And my deepest truth is sometimes I thought, oh, if he would die, would life be easier, And really but then of course immediately I said, oh, can't have these bad thoughts, But I realized the universe had a different approach to it, a more meaningful learning curve for me. Learn to look after myself and fill up my jar first and find my way back to myself.
So what was finally the breaking point that made you want to leave?
I wasn't leaving, and I think I didn't have the energy to leave because I just felt I've married, we have 3 kids together, and I felt I could never ever do that to my children, to leave and take the father away, from the children. So actually he found someone else. And during November and December, I realized it was really getting worse. And then I asked, is something, because I felt maybe he lost his job and was too afraid to say something, or maybe he had a serious health issue he wasn't sharing. And my thought were along those ways, And then he said, oh no, he wants to live on his own and he's moving out. I thought sort of, what? And that was the end of the marriage when he then decided to move out and move in with his girlfriend at the time. And for a long time, I felt a bit used and heartbroken. And how could he do that after whatever I gave, for the 20 years? And then maybe half a year later, I really was thankful. And I said, thank you for taking him away, for relieving me, because I could then feel already how much easier my life is without having to have dinner ready at 8 p.m. and having the kids put to bed, without having all the toys removed and be ready at 8 p.m. For dinner. And it all gave me that freedom to finally look after myself and start to recharge and take the time I needed without having someone else to look after.
So what is the processes you used to be able to come to this understanding? Was it meditation, or did you get counseling? How were you able to actually do that?
Later I practice meditation. But first, the very first thing I started doing was yoga, because I always wanted to do yoga. And I thought, okay, now is the best time. And that helped me to come back to myself, maybe calm my mind, the overthinking, feeling into my body, feeling into the stretches, into the breathing, and coming truly back to myself. And also that wake-up moment in the living room I shared before, asking myself the questions, what is it I want to do? Really, instead of saying, oh, what do the kids need? Or what does my husband need? Coming back to, what do I need right now? What would help me right now? And also really those moments when the divorce wasn't very friendly, and the minutes I really stepped up and said, you know what, you can't do that to me. I raised 3 beautiful children. They're your kids too, So I'm deserving of more, and all that time I gave up. These are just little nudges, little helps. And of course, meditation helps, and really coming back to the heart. What I always do is sort of touch my heart area, either with the fingers or put my hands on it, and just take a deep breath in, breathing in and releasing. And this helps me to come back to myself, to my heart, to my inner peace, and the love for myself. Because whenever I was stressed, was out there doing a lot, or when thoughts were really going crazy, I realized I wasn't with me. I was sort of out there, and then coming back to me, touching my heart, focusing on my heart and breathing. And in those moments also asking myself, what is it that I need right now? What is it that I would love to do or have right now? And these are gorgeous self-care and self-love tools to just reconnect with yourself. And also remembering, I went sort of 20 years back before I met that man and said, so what kind of music did I listen to? What did I love to do back then, was my teenage years, and did more of that. Sort of like putting an anchor 20 years back and saying, okay, who was I then? How can I become more like that girl again, doing the things she loved to do, listening to the music I love to listen, and reading the books. And what I also did is I love impressionist paintings. So I ordered some prints and had them put up in my home. And that felt just sort of like more me. I rearranged the furniture in the living room just to find it more what suits me, trying things out, trying different things out. What do I like best? I mean, maybe you have watched the movie Runaway Bride with Richard Gere and, oh gosh, my name memory, Julia Roberts. And there, she always liked the eggs, how her fiancés liked it. So she never had an idea how she herself liked her eggs. And I always saw myself like this. I mean, I knew how I liked my eggs, but in other areas, we might not really truly know what we like to do. And then maybe we just follow our husbands, our children, our friends, or maybe even our parents' guidance because we feel everybody else might know better. So it's really truly coming back to yourself and feel for you what is right for you. What would you love to do? And that can change from moment or days or weeks, and really becoming true to yourself, expressing yourself just the way you like and doing the things you love to do. And the more you can tap into that energy of you, the more you can reconnect to yourself. And yes, meditation, yoga, qigong, all those tools that help us to come back to ourselves are always wonderful.
Oh, yeah. One thing that really stood out to me of what you just said was asking for what you want. Almost every time I've worked with a client in my life coaching, I ask them what they want. And the first thing the person would reply is, I don't want this. I don't want this. I don't want this. So being able to asking what you want seems to be, what do you actually want? Not what you don't want. What do you want to move towards seems to be a good catalyst for you to find all those things to help you and to help you find yourself.
Yes. And sometimes it works both ways. If we know what we don't know, we can narrow down what we want, but really tapping. And that's why just tapping into yourself, into your heart, and asking yourself that and allowing the answers to come. And sometimes it surprises you, because what do you need, or what do I need now? What would I love to do now? And I thought of, wow, it opens up to that inner guidance, to maybe intuition, maybe even to the connection to the universe. And allow that, go with that, even if it sounds maybe a bit strange or a little crazy. But I think the more we do what was this our truth, or what we love to do, the more we can grow and be ourselves.
So what made you want to write all this down into a book about finding yourself?
These are the stories, these are 30 stories I share in my book, Conversations with Me. And these are the stories I kept telling my friends about. These are the stories that played up in my mind. And these are just the stories of my life. And I felt I really wanted to share that. And when I talked to my publisher, he then had the great idea to just put the stories, because I felt maybe I need to write a whole connected story about it. But these are sort of 30 singular stories just put out, so you can just read one story. And we also included then a wisdom from within, how people can reconnect with themselves. And also what's most important is what I learned from that stories. And some stories are sort of like, really, did that truly happen? And I thought, so yeah, it did. And I survived even that blow. It's just a book to share with others, that life goes on, and everything, every experience in our life is actually for us and never against us, or not happening to us. It's always happening for us. So we can grow, maybe reconnect with ourselves and think, what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? And that's why I shared my stories, to make it easier and inspire others. And even my aunt recently, and she's happily married. They're older, of course, but she said, I learned so much from your book. I realized I gave myself up just for peace in my marriage. I didn't voice my own truth because I just wanted to keep the status quo. And it was really lovely for me to hear that. And I said, it's all right. It's always all right. But people can learn so much. And my sister, she actually shared that book with her ex. And after they both read it, they found a way to communicate better with each other. So I really felt this is gorgeous, because it helps people to understand each other, to maybe see the other side of it, maybe feel into your ex-partner, or open the eyes for why it came this far. How can I change? What can I change in this sort of rhythm? And it's definitely not a blame book, but it's more like a reflecting book, and also reflecting stories, inviting others to reflect on themselves. And I feel by reflecting, we also reconnect more to our truth. And I feel so many of us, we might try to fit in. We grow up, we follow our parents' ideas. We, in teenage years, we try to fit in. Then maybe we have relationships or enter motherhood or fatherhood. And it's always so much about fitting in or listening to others' advice. And it always sort of takes away from us, because we don't trust ourselves enough to do how or what's right for us. We sort of try to fit in a mold. We try to fit in the society with friends, and which is also good, but not to the detriment that we give ourselves up. And allowing ourselves to be who we are is my aim for this book, allowing others to really reconnect with their own inner truth.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
So we're going towards the end of our interview, and one thing I love to ask my interviewees is for a minute of motivation. This could be the idea that you have a time machine and you travel back to your 8-year-old self, and you only have 1 minute to convey life advice, or maybe just narrow down your life philosophy in under a minute. So are you ready?
Yes, I am.
All right, let's go.
Whenever you're in fear, when you're worried, or when your thoughts are just acting out, come back to yourself. Tap on your heart, put your hands on your heart, take a deep breath in, and ask yourself, what do I need right now? Come back to your inner peace, inner love. And there you are.
Nice.
That was under a minute, wasn't it?
That was, but that's perfect.
Good.
So thank you, Caroline, for being on my podcast. I enjoyed listening to your story of how being in a marriage and losing yourself to satisfy and seems to be an ungrateful husband, and losing yourself within raising 3 kids to having a divorce, and actually having that being the catalyst to finding yourself, and through your book helping other people find themselves, which is very powerful and a story that I think can help many people. So thank you very much for being on my podcast.
Thank you for having me. Really gorgeous. Thank you.
I hope you have a fabulous day.
You too.
And there is the interview, folks. Wow. To go from feeling that neglected but trying to stick it out for 20 years just for the children, and to have that happen to her to the point where the person that she sacrificed her life left her, it's just, that is tough. I honestly don't understand how people treat each other that way. To be fair, we do not know his side of the story. I just want to put that out there because I don't feel like it's right to jump on somebody without hearing their side. But at the same time, I would like to say that, in my humble opinion, communication is one of the most important parts of a relationship, and communication definitely did not happen in a way that was beneficial for either party, it sounds like, from that relationship. One thing I liked about that story was the fact that from tragedy came finding oneself. A lot of times in life, when the worst thing happens, such as a significant other leaves, it can turn out to be the best thing for them. At least it seems like that for Caroline Palmy, because she found herself through her heart, which is amazing. I love heart. Living from heart, being from heart. That's the kind of speaker I want to be. I've been working on speaking from my heart and letting my heart shine forth into this world. I love heart. And from the interview, one thing I could hear was her pain, feeling neglected. It does make me wonder if the significant other knew that. Because I've heard stories of people thinking that they're doing everything right and only turning out that the person was feeling horrible. But I mean, it's one reason why I like the 5 love languages. Basically finding the idea of figuring out how the other person expresses love so that you can express love back in a way. I'm not saying that this wasn't a abusive relationship at all. I'm not trying to discount anything. I just think that learning to love another person and being in a relationship with a significant other is important. I like the saying that I've heard many times from Fabienne Fredrickson, from the Bold Heart, I believe it's called now. I knew it from Client Business. I forgot the name. Client Business School? Client Attraction Business School. Yeah, Client Attraction Business School. CABS. But a rising tide raises all ships. And I think that is the way in a relationship. A true awesome relationship is one where you serve the person while they serve you, trying to rise you up, build you up, and at the same time you rising them up and building them up. A way to serve each other, and communication, I think, is key in doing that. But also finding what it means to be open-hearted, what it means to love. I love the idea of unconditional love, and when people say that, when they hear that, they think of that you have to accept punishment or abuse. Unconditional love is not unconditional acceptance. And for heaven's sake, unconditional love also means unconditional love of oneself, which also means putting boundaries in, because you can't love yourself and allow you to be harmed. And I can love you and you can be far away from me and never in my life again. And when you come from the heart, that is when you can find yourself. The heart is it's magical to me. The more I live from my heart, the better I am in everyday life. When I'm in my head, or especially in my gut, because my gut loves to eat. especially the back of my head. I feel like when I kind of escape into my head, that's when I do my worst. At the same time, I love my head because, I like thinking. It's fun. But at the same time, just living from the heart is special. And if you want to learn how to live from the heart, Caroline would love to connect with you and share her love on her Facebook page, which of course is facebook.com, then Palmy Healing. You spell her last name Palmy. You can also find her on Instagram with Palmy Healing. It also turns out she has a Facebook group for women only, Open Hearted Sisterhood group on Facebook. Search Open Hearted Sisterhood or go to the facebook.com/groups/Open Hearted Sisterhood. She also has an awesome book on Amazon called Conversations with Me. Search for her name, Caroline Palmy, Caroline. It's available on Kindle and paperback, also in German. If I have any German listeners, I would be surprised. She is looking forward to getting to know you, and remember to come back to your heart. And that is episode 20, folks. How exciting is that? You have been on a ride with me when I was super excited and did so many interviews to the point where then all of a sudden life got in my way and then my podcast went monthly. And now I'm back up again. Pop, pop. That's what life is for me, is a roller coaster, and this is the year that I plan on stopping it. At least I hope so. We'll see in episode 120. Wah. So I am Brett Dupree, your champion of authentic joy, catalyst of transformation, Joyous Expansion Life Coach. You can find me at joyousexpansion.com if you want to hear more episodes. I'm at pod.joyousexpansion.com. Also, if you want to hear my old podcast, it's podcast.joyousexpansion.com. Do you hear a trend? If you want to send me an email for any reason, ask me a question, tell me how awesome I am, send me one at BRE2TsDUPR2Es at joyousexpansion.com. Like and subscribe if you're listening to it. Send me a review. Anything can help. And once again, I remind you to be love, to be joy, to be awesome. Now play my jingle.
JoyousExpansion.com JoyousExpansion.com Come and say hello to Brett Dupree. He is an inspirational life coach. Good for you and good for me. He turned my life from grey to blue. I'm sure he'll do the same for you. Get in touch and you'll see your life will change dramatically. JoyousExpansion.com JoyousExpansion.com Yeah.